Good morning, class. We spent most of this week working on those par flushes, which, by the way, are very cool looking. People really took their time and did a great job with their par flushes. I'm excited to see the projects that our friends at home have been working on to add to our display of par flushes. We will be displaying those. So nice job working on those. When we look at those par flushes, what were they used for? Cool.
The processes were used for carrying stuff. Like to us, when you're moving, you put stuff in there and it'd be easier to carry than by hand.
Yeah, it was for them to use when they were moving to carry their supplies, their materials. Did they move a lot, or did they stay in one place for long periods of time?
They moved.
Izzy?
They moved a lot.
Yeah, they moved a lot. Remember, in the fall, winter, and spring, they moved following the buffalo.
But in summer,
So they moved a lot following the food. They didn't have freezers back in the Dakota time. They couldn't save stuff from the summertime and then thaw it out like we can. We have a big freezer at my house that we put stuff in, and we use that food during the winter time. They needed fresh food. So they were going around following the buffalo. What kind of houses did they live in while they were following the buffalo? Will W? Teepees. Those were the wooden frames with the animal hide stretched around it that they could take down and set up really easily. They could use the poles from the frame to make the sleds to haul their stuff to their next campsite. So they used easy portable materials. When they were going from site to site, they wanted to make sure that they only had a few things to bring. They didn't have big TVs. They didn't have all the electronics that we have now. They didn't have big beds. Okay, they needed stuff that was portable, that they could carry. They were the beginnings of living simply. People talk today about being a minimalist and living simply, not being overwhelmed with all the materialistic things, not needing to have lots of possessions. We should have lots of memories. We should have the time that we're spending with people. They didn't want to have all of their energy put into stuff because they had to move a lot. So they didn't want to have to carry all that stuff. In the summertime, they lived somewhere else. Where did they live in the summertime, Maddie?
in a bark house.
In the bark house. Those were established houses that stayed in the same place year after year. So they had them set up in specific places where they knew the food would be. There would be maple trees to get the maple syrup. There could be rice paddies close by. There could be areas for them to grow their corn. So there were certain things that they knew they would be able to do there every year. So they had bigger, more established houses in those bark houses. Leah? That's a great question. Do people still live in bark houses? If you think about some of the cabins that people have on the lake, sometimes they have log cabins. So sometimes we use some of the same materials. If you go to a reservation, I'm not sure if, I think they have mostly materials that we use nowadays. They probably still have some bark houses for us to go see. I don't know how much they actually live in it because on the reservations, they live there year round. So they're not moving. So remember how we talked about the bark houses aren't the best houses for the winter time because they might not keep that heat inside. So I think they might have bark houses for people to see what they used to live in. I don't know if they necessarily live in it now because it wouldn't work in the winter time. Jocelyn?
I remember when I went to this lake, Walana Lake. I've gone there like every year in my life. But last year when I went there, I went to this place for the second time, and it was like we walked in and it looks like it's been there for many, many years. And people, like, men used to work there. So then there were, like, horses where you could use the horses. And it was, like, there were, like, a whole bunch of trees. And you would use the horses and, like, a riding thingy to pull down the trees. And they showed us how they did it. And then they showed us how to cut down the trees. And there was also, like, an area, like, a bedroom area where there were, like maybe, like, 20 bunk beds. And then there was a dining room where there was, like, an old table made out of wood, and then, like, a kitchen. But it was all old materials, so, like, you could tell it was old. Like, there was no lighting, the floors were dirt. There were just, like, areas, and the doors, they didn't have doors, it was just outside. And I could just imagine how cold it would be in the winter. And then there was, like, an area where they would get their stuff for hunting, and there was a whole bunch of stuff that they could use, like, different places. And then there was their bathroom, and then there was like, this well.
Yeah. There's a lot of places that people still keep set up and running like how they did hundreds of years ago. So we can get a good sense of how people lived. That's a great place to go and see how people truly lived. If you go to Fort Snelling, we talked about Fort Snelling back in September. That's a place that you can go and see what life was like back then. Up by where I live, if you go up north or west on Highway 10, they have Kelly Farm. And that's a working farm that was like it was back in the pioneer days. So if you go to a place like that, like the place Jocelyn was talking about, or one of these other places, you can see what life was like back then before they had all of the technology that we have now. What kind of technology they used. It was much simpler technology, but they still used it, like using the horses to help pull down the trees. That's a form of technology. We have much different technology now with all the electrical technology that we have. So it's good to see how they lived without the materials that we have nowadays. Izzy?
In kindergarten, we went on a field trip to the Kelly Farm, and they showed us how they planted crops, like how they cooked their food, how they, like, peeled corn.
And I remember when I went on a field trip there, we actually made butter, turning the milk into the butter. So yeah, it's really interesting to see how people lived hundreds of years ago. So today we're going to be working on our chapter comprehension. We're going to be spending time going back over that chapter. We spent this week working on those parfleches and making them, and you guys did a phenomenal job working on those. I'm excited to be setting them up and displaying them. So they are very good. There are a few of us that need to finish up. So while we have friends working on this chapter comprehension, it's broken up into all the sections in our book. We will finish up with the parfleches that our friends need to finish up with. So this is all stuff that we read about last week. We talked about it last week. So we're going back to that book and reviewing it because we are ready for our test and we need to get our minds back into the Dakota mindset. Not just with the parfleches, but with all of the other information. So when you are working on this, you need to have your books open. You need to be looking at each of these sections, going over it, finding the answers in the book. Don't just say, oh, I think it was this. I kind of remember that. Actually use the book. This chapter comprehension is graded. This will help us study for the test. The test will be on Monday. We're ready for it for tomorrow, but I don't want to throw that at you after spending 3 days working on the art project and not being engrossed in the book work. So tomorrow is going to be a review day for us. The test will be on Monday. So the chapter comprehension, Mrs. Gregory has been talking with me about how people are having a hard time writing incomplete sentences. You must write incomplete sentences on the chapter comprehension and on the test. This is not note-taking. When we take notes, we can write in short phrases. This is an assignment, so it should start with a capital, end with a period. We should be restating our question in our answer. Our first question, what does Minnesota Makase mean? How would we answer that? Cole?
Minnesota Makate means.
Yeah, Minnesota Makase means, and then write what it means. We don't just start with because. Okay, that's never a good way to start a sentence. So rewrite your question in your answer. Complete sentences. Okay, we are in 6th grade now. We should be able to write in complete sentences. Leah. Definitely use your book. I said go and look up the answers in your book. This is not a test. It's not a quiz. Don't try to remember it. Use your book so you're finding the correct answer. Yeah. Zoe, sorry.
Is this on our laptops or are we going to get?
You're going to get the handouts. Okay? So I'm just explaining it so I can sign off with our friends at home and they can do their work at home working on their parfleches. So hopefully when they come back to class, they can bring it back with them or bring back part of it and I can help them finish it up. And they can be working on this. We will be correcting tomorrow, test on Monday. So for my friends at home, we are going to sign off and say goodbye and have a good day.